When you see somebody who's a little bit different, who has a developmental disability or acquired brain injury, rather than standing back, interact with them the way that you would interact with anybody else. Say hi. So that's the starting point. And that's sort of a personal thing that people should do. Then I think the next stage to that would be also then be curious about why, when you don't see people with developmental disabilities or acquired brain injuries in certain places, be curious about that, but also try to figure out how you can support people with disabilities to be part of whatever it is. It could be your place of work, it could be your community center, it could be a nightclub late at night. Like, why are there not people with developmental disabilities out late, having a beer? And make the assumption that anything that you have in your life with supports, people with developmental disabilities have the same right to those things.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hart Hustle podcast. Doug, you spent nearly 4 decades changing the game in the nonprofit leadership. But I got to ask, was there ever a moment early on when you thought, man, I have no idea what I'm doing? Because stepping into this world had to be pretty crazy.
Oh, and you're saying early on. I have on a weekly basis thinking I have no idea what I'm doing, but that's because you have to test yourself for growth, and if you're always doing the same old thing, you're not going to move and change. Yeah, absolutely. So when I first became the CEO of UNITI, there was a shift that I made from the education world. I was in administration, having also been a teacher for 17 years. And it was quite a shift to come into an organization where I probably wasn't the subject expert. And fortunately, having a team of directors of senior staff, and I really spent the first 6 months in my direct report meetings with them learning about what it is that they did, what they were passionate about, and only then starting to get enough experience and knowledge to be able to help them make decisions.
I want to kind of go back a little bit. Let's rewind. What first pulled you into this space? Like, what was that moment or experience that made you say, okay, this is the work that I need to be doing more of?
Right at the very beginning, it was meeting my stepdaughter Krista, who has Down syndrome, and she was 3 years old at the time, and that was 33 years ago. And here she was, just this fantastic little human being who was curious, creative, funny. And when it came time for her to go to her first public school, an elementary school in Cougar Canyon, it was fascinating to me. She was going into kindergarten, and they had a parent-teacher association meeting and 400 people showed up. And there were people in that group, including like doctors, who stood up and said that this fantastic little girl wasn't welcome in the school, and really coming up with bigoted, uninformed reasons as to why. And that shifted things in my head. The realization that discrimination was out there in society, and ignorance. And, for people like Krista and others with developmental disabilities, it really changed my focus and my career path. I actually went back to school and became a teacher, and then ended up where I am now because of the realization that the world was unfair to people that didn't deserve to be treated poorly. And it became my personal mission, to support people with developmental disabilities to be leaders in their own lives, and to be able to tell their story, and to be able to stand up to bullies and bigots in the world.
I think I know I told you this last time we spoke, Doug. Like, how cool is it that you get into a relationship and it wasn't your wife that changed your life. It was her daughter that changed your life. Like, you don't know what you're getting into sometimes and how your life would change for the better. And it did. because it allowed you to see things differently. It allowed you to become an advocate for something completely different that you didn't even think of. It allowed you to go back to school and educate yourself more. You talk about always learning. Here you are still gaining knowledge every single day. And how can you better people, not just like your stepdaughter, but those around the world that face this every single day. I'm in awe, man, of just the work that you've been able to do and everything that you've kind of done. And we've seen this space really evolve over the years, truly. What's kind of been the biggest shift in how society even views inclusion and disability support?
Yeah, and lately there has been much more of a shift, and I do believe that that's tied to people with developmental disabilities being able to tell their own story. You know, when my stepdaughter was born, the doctor told her mother that she should give her up, and that Krista should be put in an institution, and that's just 33 years ago. And I would say that in the community today, there's still many people who sort of believe that an institutional model for people with developmental disabilities is the best solution. And we know that that's not true. And the shifts that have come are from a model that sees people with developmental disabilities as existing to just receive help, to the shift that UNITI and myself are trying to engender, which is that people with developmental disabilities are leaders in their own lives, but also leaders in the community. And it's a reciprocal relationship, just like anybody else with yourself in the community, that sometimes you need things, but then sometimes you're going to give things. And people with developmental disabilities, a great tragedy has been that for many years, they've never had the opportunity or the support to give back and to lead in the community.
Let's get into it. UNITI, a $20 million budget, 300 employees, which is not a very small operation when it comes to, you know, what you guys do. What makes you different from other organizations that maybe you've come across in this space?
Right, and UNITI is actually three different not-for-profits who work together and have the same leadership and board. And I think what makes us different is 20 years ago, Paul Wheeler, my predecessor as CEO, went down to New Orleans, and in New Orleans he ran into some people who were very focused on person-centered thinking, and not person-centered thinking just as an idea, but actually a set of practices that would allow us to support people with developmental disabilities in a way that listens to their voice. And so for the last 22 years, our organization has been listening and learning from the people we support. And that really, I think, set the foundation for where we are now, where people with developmental disabilities within the organization and on our board are leading, are taking quality assurance roles where they ensure that we're achieving our mission, and also are being supported to be on boards in the community and to be leaders in the community and to give back to the community as well.
If you had to actually explain the mission to a 10-year-old, how would you describe the mission to the organization, to UNITI's?
Yeah, our mission is that people with developmental disabilities and acquired brain injuries will live lives of their choosing in the community. And what that means is that whatever anybody else in community has opportunities for, we will support people with developmental disabilities to have the same opportunities to be included, but also to host the table. So I think we talked about this previously, that there is
that was actually my next question. How did you know, Doug? I was going to ask you that whole hosting the table thing. So you led right into my next question. Yes, keep on.
Right. So there's an old trope in the disability world, which is that people with disabilities should be invited to the table and to belong. Their voice should be heard at the table, and all of that, those tropes have people with disabilities as passive recipients of the charity of others. And we really want to upend that. And our belief at UNITI is people with developmental disabilities have the right to host the table. And that's a complete shift. And an example of that would be We built Chorus Apartments in 2016, first apartment of its type where it's an apartment like any other apartment, but of the 71 homes, rental homes, 20 of them spread throughout the building are for tenants with developmental disabilities. So if a person with a developmental disability never has their own home, well, then how can they host somebody else? But now that it's been set up in a way where they have their own home, they're inviting people to dinner. They're inviting their mom, their dad. They're hosting Christmas dinners, and that's because we've set up an opportunity for them to have their own home. And once they have their own home, well, guess what? They want to invite people over. They want to share their bounty with others, and we need to start thinking about that way. If a person has nothing, then how can they give back to the community?
That's actually really good. And to just give them that home, to make them feel just like everyone else feels, right? That they have their own space and that they can invite others, because of course, who doesn't want to invite friends and family to what's theirs? So I love that you guys have thought that. And I think that nonprofits are often seen as just a feel good, but not always respected as a serious business. And in reality, the nonprofit spaces are just like the for-profits. One has stakeholders, one has stockholders. If you're into raising money, then that means you're probably good at sales, all right? That is really very similar. You adopted the CEO title to change that though. What difference has that actually made for you?
Right, and you're right. Within the not-for-profit world, there's the idea that we need to be, again, kind of passive and nice and go hand in hand to people to ask for their help. What I was finding was as UNITI tried to form relationships in the business world, people didn't really understand what an executive director was or did. In some organizations, it's not even the top person in the organization. And so my board and myself decided that we would change my title to CEO. And that was so that people in the business world would understand, the structure of UNITI, and it also gave me more of a voice to speak with when I was speaking to business people about the need to be inclusive, and also in a reciprocal nature, volunteering my time to be part of the business world. I joined the board. I was elected to the board of the Surrey Board of Trade, the fifth biggest board of trade in Canada, and ended up being the chair of that board for 2 years. And again, so a reciprocal relationship where I'm giving of my time to make the business community stronger. Because if I'm assuming that business owners should be hiring people with developmental disabilities, which they definitely should, it comes a lot more real if I'm actually putting some skin in the game in that reciprocal relationship as well.
If the Hart Hustle podcast has ever sparked any idea or made you think differently, do us a favor. Make sure you guys share this, post it on LinkedIn, or even text that nonprofit friend that you just have. Whatever works, this is what keeps the conversation going and allows us to just grow this community together. Seriously, we appreciate you. That's why you're the man. That's why you've been doing this for as long as you have, man, because you think differently. And you've also thought outside the box, which is really funny because I had this conversation with my board recently. You've been able to blend the old school methods, which is like mailing letters, with also that modern digital strategy. And my nonprofit all the time is like, hey, we got to mail letters. And I'm like, but who's looking at these letters? But you said there is still some. What's kind of surprised you most about what actually works with that old school and that new modern digital world?
Right, and for communications, that's so important in that social media, it kind of sets the stage. It tells your brand. But as you know, on Facebook, when you have a Facebook event and, maybe 5% of the people who say they're interested or will show up actually do show up. So you also need to have that personal touch. And that personal touch for some people, if we're looking at our donors, is really what works for them. We have donors who want to have mailed letters, but for the majority of them, they're more than happy to have communication via email, where you can set up links and take them to videos and other things that are demonstrating what we are doing to achieve our mission and make the community better. So really the communications piece you can't, there's many organizations, not-for-profit organizations, that you're right, are still stuck in the old way with mail outs, and not thinking about the full facet of how you communicate, and how you can get in touch with the community. And it's a two-way street as well, because we also want to learn from the community what it is that they think we should be doing.
We'll go a little bit about these nonprofits as well, because you also talked about pushing for younger, more diverse voices. And I've actually seen that, and even the nonprofit that I'm in, that when I got a seat at the table, I was added to the table because they needed just more young blood, is what they mentioned it, right? But I'm not seeing that. I'm actually in a place now where everyone on the board is like 20 years older than me, 30 years older than me, and I'm trying to bring in this youth. But why do you think there's a big barrier that's really stopping that from happening?
Right, and I think there's that barrier is there's multiple reasons for it, and one would just be sort of that traditional idea on boards that it is older people who are involved with boards. I think we are more knowledgeable now about diversity of boards, diversity of ethnicity, cultural background, and things like that, and disability. But very rarely do people think of that sort of that ageism, and it's ageism against young people, and young people, they're the ones that give me hope. So whenever I talk to young people, and when I was a teacher in school, I would always talk to them about the need for them to get involved with boards, both as a way for themselves to progress in their careers, but also for a way for them to give back and create different viewpoints. One of the best things that ever happened to me is a student of mine who volunteered with UNITI when I was teaching. She ended up being my boss. She ended up being a board member who served for over 10 years and was a fantastic board member, and was, quite youthful compared to the rest of the board.
Wow, that's actually pretty cool. And how do you get business leaders, especially like politicians, to actually listen to you, to not just give that standard "we support inclusion" line, but really understand what the mission is, and what are you trying to do to change not just the community, but to change the world in the line of work that you're doing?
Yeah, and it comes back to that reciprocity, and the need for decision makers and politicians to understand that the voice of people with disabilities is important, and actually is good for their political careers as well. And we've managed to establish that, and it really started when we began supporting people to become part of municipal committees. To do work on such things as like the housing needs report that our city of Surrey needed to do. A young lady that we support who has Down syndrome, she actually put that survey into plain language and ensured that over 100 people with developmental disabilities were able to have their voice included in the housing planning for our city. And then also getting people with developmental disabilities economically involved in terms of being employed, but also attending chamber and board of trade events, where we have it now in our city when self-advocates of Semiamu, a partner group of ours that are people with developmental disabilities, they attend all the events, and usually their table is the one that has the most action, because people want to come and talk to them, and not talk to them about I guess traditional stereotypical disability kind of ideas, but like, how's that housing development going? What have you been doing on the accessibility committee, working with the city? Like, it's just the narrative has completely changed. And so we have the premier of our province, who knows probably 5 of the people we support on a first name basis. Our mayor, invites out people from our organization with disabilities to have lunch with her. Like, it's getting people into the halls of power, but it's happening because decision makers, well, partly they're mostly good people, but secondly, they actually now see people as people, and so when an apartment is being approved, they're thinking about, oh, this is Lauren, who I know very well, who's going to live in the apartment. And yeah, I would support that because it's something that I'm familiar with, and she's a good person.
Such a cool space to be in, man. I almost feel like you're living the dream right now, right? Like just the rooms you get to be in, the people that you make smile, the families that you're able to touch, the connections you're making. I love the ability where you're seeing these individuals with disabilities then have their own home. That is so cool that you guys thought that far into it as well, and that you're just working with other leaders that they can also see the mission and the growth that is happening. Then we also have what's happening in the world in every field, which is AI. And as I talk to a lot of nonprofit leaders, they kind of, it's something that some people are still curious about per se. What is your thoughts when it comes to AI and how it can actually enhance what you're already doing? Not so much replacing anybody, because that's what I think that the fear is, that it's replacing bodies, but it's not. It's becoming a resource. It's a tool that we can use to enhance what we're already doing. What is your thoughts on
Yeah.
AI in the nonprofit space?
And you know what's really cool? Since I talked to you, I actually have been to Toronto with a cohort of leaders from across Canada, and Deloitte actually put us in a greenhouse creative space and talked about AI. So I'm actually more knowledgeable about AI when I was last time, and there definitely are benefits, and I think there's benefits for both the operations and practices of an organization such as ours, but then also benefits for people with disabilities in terms of improving their quality of life. So to start off with, and I think you talked a bit about this last time, in terms of our organization, we've been talking with our board about perhaps creating a board agent, an AI board agent, who would take minutes, but also be the judge of like the values of the organization, and might say things like, well, you've made this decision. Are you sure it's aligning with the values that you say you have? And sort of checking in that way. So that's something that I'm talking about with my board. They're a bit hesitant right now, but I do see that there's at the governance level, there's going to be some great uses for AI as an assistant and as someone that kind of tracks decisions and ensures that they are aligned with values and the strategic planning of the organization. And then within the organization, in terms of strategic planning, there's great uses of AI. And even one of the things that we're thinking about now is we have direct report relationships with the people who report to me and whatnot. And how can we make everything flow together into our strategic planning and all of the work that we do? So I think there's going to be some really strong AI applications in terms of ensuring that everything from our direct report meetings to our larger strategic plan are aligned, and also we're not doing extraneous additional work that we don't need to. So also more streamlined. And then finally, in terms of supporting people with disabilities, AI, I think, is going to have some fabulous implications for people who don't communicate by speaking. Perhaps helping figure out what their body motions, etc., mean, and being able to express that in a way that people in the community can understand. And also for our direct support workers who have quite a bit of administration that they have to do. Helping them do that in a way where the person with the disability is also involved, and the reports that we have to create are created, but with less work, less administrative work, and more face-to-face work with our staff.
You mentioned note taking, and I actually implemented this in my last meeting. We all have that secretary that is taking down notes and making everything look good. So I told her, I said, hey, why don't we just do it? Because sometimes we do meetings virtually. So I'm like, why won't we just have a note taker? Because just like we had a note taker when me and you first met, how beneficial that actually was, for us. You see what we were able to kind of create, Doug. So what does that look like when you're having an hour conversation, hour and a half conversation with your board, and you want the secretary to be involved because she's just as knowledgeable and she's just as innovative as everybody else. But if she's so focused taking down notes, she's also missing pieces. She's also not feeling like she's a part of it. So one of the things I mentioned is like, hey, no one loves to take notes. I don't like to take notes, at least.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, do you like doing that? And she's like, well, I mean, we have to, right? And I'm like, well, we really don't. Like, there's spaces that we can actually kind of help you out with AI. Another one I think I mentioned to you was the grant writing. on how that could
Right.
actually be very beneficial, for us. I'll tell you another one. I've recently had a situation. I love AI. I use ChatGPT very often, by the way. I had another issue where I took over this nonprofit and they lost the 501c3. So I was like, oh my God, the first thing I got to do is make sure we get the 501c3 back. So we're
Right.
working on getting it restated. I reach out to a gentleman. He says it's going to be $5,000. And just because I needed to get it done, cool, let's do it. All right. Now at the end of it all, he's charging me $8,000. And
Right.
I'm like, $8,000? You didn't even tell me where we're going to see the increase or XYZ. So I say all that to say that I started to implement the conversation that we were having per email. I was inputting that in ChatGPT, the conversations. Anytime they gave me a screenshot, I'll put that into ChatGPT.
Right.
Invoices. So with catching all the red flags, wait, how did this invoice change from this title to this title? Wait, why are they charging you here when it, and it gave me all this, like, I mean, insight. It was creating emails for me to the point that it was kind of back and forth. It gave me this very, like almost aggressive, but not too aggressive on, hey, this is what we're paying. Send me the
Right.
invoice and let's continue moving. And I got it down to 5,000, all because ChatGPT played my CPA. I mean, granted, I was also talking to an actual CPA and say, hey, man, is this right? Is this wrong? Because
Mhm.
I don't know the line of work. But how about those nonprofits that cannot afford a high CPA or a lawyer? Right? Just
Mhm.
sometimes we want to just do things at that level, and it's helped me out as it's been my lawyer before. So I love the AI space on what it's really doing, and I think that for nonprofits, yes, there is a space of, especially for myself, I want people to use AI for grant writing. I want them to use AI for note taking, but now we have to teach them how to do these things, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, are you going to have to spend a little time and maybe a little money to create a workshop and get everybody on board? Yes. But does it save time? Does it save you money? Does it save all these things long term? Absolutely. Just imagine having a chat bot on your website that all the volunteers, so all the donors that had questions can go into this one place and they don't have to call Doug. They don't have to call the receptionist. They don't have, everything is there for them. And then the more that they're actually asking, it's learning, right? These things, that
Yeah.
language learning model. So I love it.
Yeah, and a chatbot for people in the community interested in you, but also a chatbot that is protected from the outside world.
Hmm.
That for internal organization, where you put all your policies,
Yeah.
you put all your and just feed the information so that new employees, if they have a question, they can ask it and it will say like, oh yeah, that's this policy here and this is how you're supposed to do it, and even just best practices and values, and so yeah, it is exciting, and I for one have always been very hesitant and worried about a world where humanity doesn't exist and it's all just robots talking back and forth to each other. But what I find is that it actually helps because it does this organizational thing so that you can then see things more clearly and then are able to express yourself better. So yeah, no, I'm quite excited about it, and I think there's lots of opportunity, but there of course is risk as well. But
100%.
you know what? Like, I think you started off by saying, like, are there things that you don't know? And I'm like, yeah, and I love it. Like, I don't know everything I need to know about AI at all. But boy, is it ever interesting to learn it, right? And to have
It
an
is.
organization where people are excited about learning. I just love that. And so my plan is to get people who are really excited from across all the departments who are excited and interesting about AI, and create a little working group where we can just sort of get together and learn and teach each other, and then teach our colleagues after we've decided what the best practices should be. So yeah, exciting times for sure.
I see, man. You sound like a different person ever since you went to this workshop in Canada. Now you're like, I'm AI driven. I
That's
tell you,
right.
man, ChatGPT is one of those things that I had a good friend tell me this 2 years ago, and it seemed cool, but like anything, it's like, oh, okay, cool, And I didn't spend any time with it. And then this last year, probably almost a full year, I'd been just really understanding ChatGPT and like yourself, learning about all these different AI tools. But just that little ChatGPT, and we're at the beginning stages of what that actually does for us. But seeing how it helped me, and I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it had these creative ideas I never could even think of myself. And when you see that, you're
Right.
like, oh wow, why didn't I think of that? but it also helps me see things differently, speak differently. So while people think it's the easy way out, I think I'm being more educated, that I'm having more conversations, and I speak to it just like I'm speaking to you. Hey, I have this issue, and I love to talk to it, and for it to talk back to
Yes.
me, it's like having this conversation with this, as you
Have, have,
mentioned,
have you have
an
you
assistant.
have you have you asked it to name itself? So my chat
I
GPT,
have it.
it named itself Justice. So that's my
Okay, I'm gonna ask it today. I'm gonna see what
development. Yeah.
I'm gonna see what
And
David comes up with. Doug, for folks that are actually listening right now and they want to make a real impact, what's one thing they can actually do today that could not just help maybe your organization, but help those that are in the same space, those that are dealing with disabilities and feel like they're just almost on the outskirt of real life?
right. And our funder had a campaign a few years ago, which was just say hi. And I agree with that as a starting point. So a starting point should be that when you see somebody who's a little bit different, who has a developmental disability or acquired brain injury, rather than standing back, interact with them the way that you would interact with anybody else. Say hi. So that's the starting point, and that's sort of a personal thing that people should do. Then I think the next stage to that would be also then be curious about why when you don't see people with developmental disabilities or acquired brain injuries in certain places, be curious about that, but also try to figure out how you can support people with disabilities to be part of whatever it is. It could be your place of work. It could be your community center. It could be a nightclub late at night. Like, why are there not people with developmental disabilities out late, having a beer? And make the assumption that anything that you have in your life with supports, people with developmental disabilities have the same right to those things.
Yeah, I like that, man. I have a little niece that has a disability, and my daughter, that's 4 years old, got to see her cousin now that is 7 years old for the first time, and of course, very different, right? To herself, she was putting like things in her mouth that normally a 7-year-old wouldn't. So my daughter, obviously, just kind of looking like, why is she doing that? Why is she like that? And I was so happy when my 16-year-old niece comes and says, because we're all so very different. Our minds think very differently, and she's still human just like us, and we still love her. This is my 16-year-old niece saying this to my 4-year-old daughter, and here I am, dad, trying to create something in my head on how I'm going to, have this
Yeah.
conversation. And I looked at my niece, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what, like, I love
Hmm.
that she was able to have that conversation because now when she sees someone, out in the world, because she's going to be an adult, that she has a better understanding. And that my daughter also gets to see that because she's going to have a better understanding, because we see it all the time. And I don't want us to ever look at them differently. And this is what you're doing it for. We don't ever want them to feel excluded. We want them to feel included. And how do we do that? Right. And it's that we're educating even from our young ones, that they don't just stare and like why that person looks like that, or why are they in the wheelchair, or why are they this. We should be able to look and say, hey, they're human just like us. God created them a little bit differently because we're all
Yeah.
special in our own way.
Absolutely, and I love the fact that young people now go to schools that are inclusive, and there are people with disabilities who are there, because that sets up the stage where it's not different, and it's like, that's just that person. That's how they act, and this is how you can support them. There were no people with developmental disabilities in the schools that I went to, and I feel like that's actually a tragedy that I was not able to have relationships and know people with developmental disabilities until I met my stepdaughter. And if you look in any family, including my own, when we start talking about things, there are great aunts or people with disabilities who have been hidden away, and we need to shift that. And I think a way to shift that is to support reciprocal relationships, so that people with developmental disabilities don't exist just to receive help, but actually lead their own lives and lead the community as well.
This is so cool. We're going to start wrapping this up here, Doug, but if you can sit down with your younger self, let's say the younger self that is getting fresh into this nonprofit world, what's that one big piece of advice that you would give young Doug?
Oh man, Yeah, because there's some things that we've done where like I don't know if I would do it again, right? So I'm not even sure if I'm a good one to give advice because to tell you the truth, the trauma that's been experienced in trying to build the latest apartment that we had, where like so I might not give advice because my advice might be, man, it might not be worth it to your health. Like I would say, man, just freaking you keep going. Like you keep going when you think you need to stop and check on this thing to get it perfect. No, you keep going and you keep going with the values at the forefront, and that is that people with disabilities should be fully included and also be leaders when they have the opportunity. And you keep that in mind. And you know what? People that don't believe that, don't partner with them. That's something I would say is like only partner with people who actually have the same beliefs and understanding and willingness to change to understand if they don't. So I'd be hesitant to go back and give advice because I might say like, man, that it's so difficult. But and if I had
Don't
known
do
that
it.
in person, I might not have done it. So it's So I'd say like, I just keep going, just keep going.
And really good for anybody, right? Just keep going, because life is not easy. Life becomes very challenging, and when you're faced with something, and you were faced with something, Doug, you kept going. How do I navigate around this? This is different, which was your stepdaughter. This is different. How do I love her just like I would love anybody else? And I think you kept going, and look what you're doing. You're not leaving a legacy just for yourself, but it's in honor of her, because you were able to experience her. And now you're like, cool, how do I make sure that everyone gets the same experience? Because I want everyone to feel this. So, I mean, kudos to you, man. You're leaving a huge legacy. And I'm going to keep you in the hot seat because we're going to go straight into that blind question.
Okay,
So
sure.
this is the curveball. Let's say Unity is making a movie about his journey. Who's playing you, and what's one scene that has to make the final cut?
Oh man. Yeah.
While you think,
I
I'm gonna
would
tell you
say okay.
who I automatically thought. Tom Hanks plays you.
Okay, yeah. He's a good guy. I was thinking Liam Neeson because he can bring
Okay.
with him. He's a good guy, but you know what? Don't get in his way. 'Cause-
I love it.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah. And that's
And what's
another
one
thing too. Like
scene?
sometimes you have to be nice, but I truly believe that. And I'm fortunate to come from a very privileged sort of background. My ethnicity, all the rest of that, where I can talk to people in a certain way that is unexpected sometimes, and so I do feel that there are times when you need to actually call a person out, a decision maker out because they're doing the wrong thing and they're being a bigot. Like you if you stay quiet. And this is particularly important, I think, right now with what's going on in the world, is you can't stay quiet. You have to speak the truth. And when you do so, you also realize that the majority of the community are good people and are behind that as well.
I agree. So now I'll take you out the hot seat, man, and ask a question for the next leader, whether they're in the healthcare space, the nonprofit space that will come on to this podcast. What is your question to them?
Yeah, so my question is, if you had a very strong belief about leadership before you became the leader you are, that's changed. What is a leadership belief you had that's changed since you've become the leader that you are?
Love it. That's actually a really good question. I always love these questions, man, because I started to think about myself. Like every time I hear these questions, I have to start to answer them myself. So just imagine, these are a lot of questions that I'm answering, but it's so helpful because it makes you see things differently. I always feel that when you get to ask that question, sometimes we forget why we even do it. We got to go back to ask those questions. This is really good. Doug, this has truly been incredible. Where can people connect with you and support with Unity's work?
Yeah, thanks so much. So our website is probably the best way to connect with us. And so that's www.uniti, UNITI, the number 4, ALL.com. And maybe you can put that in the comments or something like that as well. And so that would be the best way. And we're also pretty active on Facebook and Instagram, and all of those have connections and way to connect with us. And I would invite anybody out there who has an organization similar to Unity, trying to build housing, trying to do anything. I'm always happy to have discussions, because Unity exists to achieve our ends, which is that the people with disabilities will have a good quality of life and make their own decisions. And so we can't do that ourselves. So like, we share everything that we learn generously with anybody who's interested.
I love it. Doug, you've been amazing. If you guys are still watching, make sure that you guys do share with a friend. Make sure that you guys do like, but also make sure that you guys are visiting Unity and figuring out how you can continue to increase what's already happening. There's already so much happening with Unity and Doug and the housing, but how can you continue to be a part of this world? We thank you so much, Doug, for just lending us your time. I know you're such a busy person, but thank you so much for lending your time. Guys, this has been the Hart Hustle podcast. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Laters.
Thank you.